I think the key is, as a judge, to preserve the dignity of everyone who comes into that courtroom, the people's courtroom. Preserve their dignity, whether it's the defendant, to make sure that his constitutional rights are fully protected, the victim, the police, the witnesses, the business litigants, the families. You know, we're talking about divorce cases, we're talking about civil cases, we're talking about land use cases, we're talking about litigation with state agencies. It's a broad group, but if we're focused on criminal justice, again, I go back to the oath I took as a prosecutor, which is always to seek the truth. And sometimes the truth really hurts. And I think a judge, a prosecutor, everybody needs to think about that constantly. Am I doing the right thing for the right reason? And am I protecting the dignity, the human dignity, the unalienable dignity of every person who comes in that court? You might not like the decision that I make as a judge, but if I make a swift, efficient decision that's predictable, and I want to mention that in a domestic relations context real quickly, and that is, in a divorce case, I've talked to family lawyers who say, I sit down with my client, she's getting a divorce, I tell her, here's the law, here are the facts of your case, but you better settle for less than you're entitled to, even though you have 3 children, because we don't know what the judge is going to do. The best thing the judge can do to serve all the people and their dignity is to be predictable and fair. Thank you.
I'll just carry the domestic relations analogy for briefly, because I did it for a long time, and I've had judges look down at both parties and say, if y'all want to settle this with a scalpel, y'all need to do it yourselves, because I, as a judge, am going to operate with a chainsaw, and neither one of you is going to walk out here happy. Nobody's going to get the dishes. The same with criminal cases. Sometimes you have to protect victims, especially victims of violent crime. You know, there are mandatory sentences, and that's up to the legislature, and that's what they've got to, you know, that's where those laws come from. To make sure that, but on the flip side, you have victims who sometimes do try and take advantage of the situation, who will come in looking for a civil reward. You know, they're going to try and treat it as a civil case. A good judge, sometimes everybody leaves a little bit unhappy because nobody got everything they wanted. But you do have to protect victims, and you have to protect the society. A lot of that discretion is going to go into what, in the criminal sense of the word, the prosecutor and the defense lawyer work out. Negotiated settlements, and please handle a lot of these cases. If the case goes to trial, you have to look at what are the equities on both sides and what are the past records, and that's how you handle that.
I'm going to stay on criminal law because the question was regarding mass incarceration and the balance of mass incarceration. I have to tell you, I really love being a trial lawyer. One of the things that motivated me to become a judge is because there were some inequities I was seeing. I don't think that it should matter what your victim looks like or what your defendant looks like. I think that you do have to, as the judge, protect that particular individual victim and the community at large, because the reality is crime affects the entire community. But you also have to remember that the defendant standing before you is a human being and make an individual decision. And it just has to, at the end of the day, be based on the facts and the act that they committed. And that sometimes may mean that a young African-American man goes to jail because of the activities he did that day. And sometimes that means that he gets a second chance. And the same is true of a Caucasian man or any other ethnicity. I fought for all types of victims. My biggest donor is actually a Caucasian female that was a victim of mine 10 years ago. I don't fight differently because of who you are. I'm gonna sit there on the bench and treat everyone fairly.